Ben, you're over there to the right. If we could start coming to the tables, we're going to try to start at 8:15, and this will be live streamed, so things that you say will be open to the public. Just want to warn you. And Denny Wallaker didn't know that one time and made some comments he shouldn't have, so I don't want anybody to make the wrong comments, but. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here today. I know you all have busy schedules, and it's always hard to get together with these events, but there are some things that we have felt concerns the City of Fargo that we wanted to kind of explain and go through a little bit and look to your guidance and wisdom to kind of help us figure it out. Some things we can solve, some things we can't. I want to thank all of you for all the work and efforts you've done that have helped the city in the past and helped us get to a variety of different things. The diversion is at 51% completion and is continuing on task to be done in 26 with functional analysis, or could be worked in 27. So we do have a new commissioner that has joined us, and we'll kind of go around and introduce ourselves so you know who's who in this area, but we're glad to be here. So Tim Mahoney, Mayor of Fargo.
Michelle Turnberg, the new commissioner for the City of Fargo.
Tim Mathern, State Senator in near South Fargo.
Judy Lee, Senator from West Fargo, District 13.
Kristen Norris, Senator from District 27, Southern Rural Cass County.
Jim Jonas, Representative, District 13, West Fargo.
Scott Wagner, Representative, District 45, North Fargo and Rural Cass.
Hamida Dakane, District 10.
Carla Rose Hansen, I represent downtown and part of North Fargo in District 44.
Representative Ben Koppelman, District 16, West Fargo.
Carrie McLeod, Representative for District 45, North Fargo and up into the Egg area.
Kathy Hogan, Senator from Central Fargo and West Fargo. We have a little bit of both.
Senator Jim Rose, District 46 in South Fargo.
John Strand, City Commission, Fargo.
Denise Kolpak, City Commission, Fargo.
And Mike, you had the staff that are going to be presenting today as well, please.
Yes, absolutely. Good evening, or sorry, good morning, legislators. We appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for being here. We'll have a number of staff today. Virtually joining us this morning is Police Chief David Zabolski. He will be talking about public safety. We have Jen Fall from the Fargo Cass Public Health Department. She's our new director. She's going to be talking about a couple of various topics. And then we have Julie Bommelman, our Director of Transit for the Fargo Transit Department. She will also be here. She has brought her team as well. So we just appreciate your time this morning. We'll have just a few PowerPoints that I should add will be emailed out, a link emailed out. Due to the file size, we'll use our FTP site, the city's FTP site. So we'll give you credentials to get into that. You'll be able to download any of the material you see here today. But we really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here.
So the theme today in our presentations, you'll hear quite a bit about mental health. It is a common thread that connects many of the topics in public safety and unmet housing needs in Fargo. As legislators and residents of Fargo and West Fargo, we are a part of this community. You'll see the challenges with the chronically unhoused individuals in our community and what issues have become a part of our city the last recent years. This issue is impacting downtown business and residents. Our downtown is a jewel, as we all know. It's something that we really have a lot of pride in and does very well. But the unhoused, oftentimes it's a larger metro-wide issue in West Fargo and Fargo as well. We're not alone when you look across the cities. Moorhead has issues, West Fargo has issues. Fargo has been leading several discussions on the chronically unhoused, the lack of affordable housing, and what we can do to improve the conditions of these individuals in our downtown. Our housing study revealed that in the next 10 years, we need 15,000 housing units. Now that seems like a lot, but the last 10 years, we did 17,000. So it's not undoable. We can do housing, but you have to have that happen. Jen Fowle just joined us. She's our new public health director. And when we get her here right away, we're going to make a presentation. Here, welcome to the new job. And by the way, you're going to present to our legislative team. But she's got a lot of data, and we will send the slides out to you because I think the data will help you figure out some of what the challenges is that we face as a community. Jen?
First time. Thank you.
And just so you understand, as a team, we've been working on this for quite some time, and the forum is kind of upset that we don't have open meetings all the time, but you have to get all the shareholders in a room and try to figure out what's going on, where we're going with things. So we have spent a lot of time all through the spring and summer working on this issue and trying to come up with some solutions. So, Jen, go ahead.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. This presentation was actually made by the Bloomberg Associates, who is providing some pro bono effort towards this cause as well. So the slide deck was updated. This is a talk about the Fargo Engagement Center and proposal that has been in the works prior to my arrival and will continue the effort going forward. As you know, because you live here, work here, and play here, Fargo is a community of compassion that has been a leader in the development of effective homeless services. We do have the Downtown Engagement Center, the Gladys Ray, the city-run shelter that has a capacity of 28 to 35 beds. We've done winter warming for 40 to 60 people at the Gladys Ray. We have the downtown resource officers, the mobile outreach teams that go to the homeless camps in downtown. An effort to end veterans' homelessness, the withdrawal management unit and detox center that is in conjunction with the Gladys Ray Center. They're connected. And the homeless engagement assistance response team, which is now our HEART team that works downtown in the heart of the city, engaging with members or community members who are homeless. There is a discussion and a narrative in the community that exists that the Downtown Engagement Center was born out of COVID and out of a need. And I want to correct the narrative in that the Downtown Engagement Center actually was part of a 2-year study that began in 2016 and ended in 2018. And it was the Downtown in Focus. And the discussion in that proposal was to have an engagement center where the people who were unhoused, unsheltered were. And so it wasn't a idea of build it and they will come. It was an idea of put the services where the people are. And that was then the development of the discussion and the inception of the Downtown Engagement Center, which was touched on again in 2023. This plan further advocated for creating a 5-year strategy for sustaining the temporary Downtown Engagement Center. The stakeholders know well that the center at its current location does not meet the needs of the population that we are serving, and it is undesirable for many of the downtown businesses and the discussions that we've been having within chambers as well. What COVID did do, however, was provide funding, and it provided the opportunity to stand up the current location with, in 2020, the $250,000 CARES funds that the city was able to physically convert the former police building to the quarantine and isolation that we needed to expand space out of the Gladys Ray shelter due to space issues needed for COVID. The city piloted at that time the conception of the Downtown Engagement Center, which was discussed in the In Focus study. And that was also a time when Gladys Ray used it for excessive space for the sheltering when renovations were happening. As the COVID funding, however, is ending, our homelessness issue in Fargo is increasing. During COVID, many cities saw that there was a surge in unsheltered homelessness. And when I talk about unsheltered, that means people who aren't in shelters, people who aren't in cars, but are truly sleeping within the streets. The homelessness was allowed due to federal guidance that allowed them to stay unsheltered and stay in the place. Fargo launched the deck and was able to help the homelessness and keep the population down. As funding ends, it's critical that our city continues to invest in the strategies that work to keep this homeless population safe and reduced. In July of 2024, the brainstorming with the Bloomberg Group came to town, and some of you were in the room with us. The City of Fargo, key stakeholders, had the engagement center, discussed culturally welcoming places for people to access an array of services and flexible spaces and to support their journey out of homelessness. And the diagram on the far right is just some of the words that we used within the discussion of things we would like to accomplish within the new deck. Participants in the day included the mayor, the city administrator, commissioners, city staff, nonprofit staff, businesses, leaders, police, healthcare providers, nonprofit providers, and those with lived experiences of homelessness. Our Downtown Engagement Center's temporary location has been a success, even though it hasn't been designed to do the work that is being done. We've had 14,706 unique guests served there in 2023, with over 34,445 encounters. From January 1st to January 2024, the Downtown Engagement Center has already served 1,001 unique individuals with 19,004 encounters. And an encounter is somebody who's coming into the engagement center who maybe needs a shower, needs to wash some clothes, charge a phone, grab a bite to eat, use a bathroom, get a drink of water. It can also be connecting with other services. There are 30 other services that come and provide services through the DEC. Southeast Human Service Center, Rape and Abuse Crisis Center, North Dakota Brain Injury Network, the Veterans Administration. There's a touch point at this one facility where all of the services come together. We have 3 co-located facilities within the organization as well. Family Healthcare is there. They do a homeless health clinic. In 2023, they had over 2,000 clinical encounters. So far this year, we're missing 2 months of data, but we've had 505 clinical encounters at the Homeless Health Center. Housing Navigation, our partners with presentation and housing, also works there and is co-located to provide people a means out of homelessness. Despite the impressive services, however, that are happening there, it's still seen as disruptive to downtown businesses and contributing to loitering. The data on the far right, you'll get in your slides when it's emailed out. We are looking at over 19,000 encounters so far for the year, and it'll just talk roughly there how many and what their average daily census is. The Mobile Outreach Program, MOP as it's referred to, also is new to downtown, and it will go through the numbers that we provide there with transports. And transports is something that happens downtown, or where somebody who is homeless or not homeless, but is having a concern, a behavior, is maybe intoxicated and needs a ride to their home or to detox. But this is something that this particular team does. They also go to the outreach and engagements in the camps. A new center at a new location provides the opportunity for us to add services and to deliver services better. The primary goal for a new engagement center would be to divert some of the arrests and connect people to the services that they need, those that are non-victim offenses, misdemeanors or felonies, where mental health or substance issues are the real problem, and getting those more addressed at a lower level of cost and care. Input from Police Chief David Cebulski agreed with an interview with the Bloomberg Associates that a new center could become a meaningful alternative and location for police to divert individuals who are in need of those services to meet the immediate needs. And it will take less time then for police to be able to hand off, if you will, the person who needs that care to a staff at an engagement center. It frees up time. Other cities that are managing diversion services in this fashion have seen reduced arrest and detentions for quality of life offenses, improving people's well-being and saving scarce resources from local jails and even some of our mental health facilities or emergency rooms. I believe the Bloomberg Associate Group is working to have Chief put into contact with some of those other cities and other chiefs in those cities to have that conversation and to get a better dialogue going. A downtown engagement center also has an opportunity for permanent supportive housing. You'll see PSH in acronyms. A need for more deeply affordable housing, much to the mayor's previous comments, including that we need more affordable housing in downtown. The studies are listed here, and we can include those links if you need in your slides as they're sent to you for easy reading. And we know that we have taken down some of the more affordable housing in downtown, and we have put up more expensive housing in downtown, which has helped contribute to some of the problem. There's examples of creative ways to have the Downtown Engagement Center meet both permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, and the efforts that previously were discussed in the slides. So this is one way that we can look for funding and efforts that have this co-facilitated or co-located services. Other permanent supportive housing is being looked at also, and this is the city's using an evidence-based strategy to have and reduce homelessness. The utilization of a Housing First initiative. Chambers has heard the Fargo Streets to Housed program pilot that we would like to initiate, and we have the blessing to do so. Using this model paired with a master leasing program in scattered sites. So people who become housed aren't going to be housed in one apartment building, but they will be members of our community throughout the community. The city has successfully passed the ordinance as of Tuesday evening that prohibits camping but allows a resolution for people to camp while we stand up the services for the Housing First initiative and move to have people into their own homes. It also allows us to provide that service through the Downtown Engagement Center. I also wanted to say that at the Downtown Engagement Center, the presentation partners in housing house roughly one person a week. And with the resources that we currently have, with more resources, we can house more people. And so with everybody working toward that initiative, we can move faster. Again, stated the Bloomberg Associates created the slide deck. We meet with them once every other week, and we'll continue to do that until we have our new engagement center developed. The pro bono work that they're offering us is wonderful, and we are going to continue to seek additional supports and efforts and partnerships towards this initiative. Thank you.
You're going to need, I'm sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Jen, I know the coalition of organizations who work to end homelessness go across the river and look at our larger community along with Moorhead. Can you speak a little bit about the capacity of Churches United, how many beds they have that adds to the number of beds that Gladys Ray has, and just how they're involved with some of the planning that you've just talked about, just in terms of our broader community?
Sure. I'm not aware of the current beds of Churches United or the status of where they're at with recent discussions. I know that they did come to a meeting for the Homeless Coalition, and they did talk about their winter warming plan, and they will not be expanding for winter warming coming up. So that is something that we are also starting to consider and think about. That is really all that I know about the Churches United bed status.
Churches United find $500,000 of funding that people came out and helped. And right now, the coalition of people are working with them to try to have long-term sustainability. It's critical to the homeless in the community that survive. So we'll continue to work with that. Thank you. Go ahead, again.
Thank you, Mayor. And Jen, have you presented or offered your vision to the committee that Representative Koppelman is looking at on legislative initiatives on this very issue? And because we have a major effort going on at the state level, tell me how you're interacting with that initiative, because I think there's been good work done at the state level, but I want to make sure we're working together.
Mm-hmm. I know in the spring, Chandler Essinger was there to represent some of the issues that we have been working on within the Housing First initiative and Downtown Engagement Center. Senator Mathern has sent out an email asking for additional information from our work in order to add that to a bill going forward September 12th, I believe it is. And so working on the structure for that will come more this week. And so I have not presented to legislation, no. This is my very first. Thank you, Kathy.
And may I continue with one more question? The other variable that you didn't reference in your presentation was the significant decrease in rent help for low-income people. And when there's not rent subsidies, a lot of people just, even if they were working, fell out of enough money to pay for their rent. And so it's a new population that, and did you consider in your studies the implications of the loss of rent help?
Sure. We haven't gotten that detail, but I know through the Downtown Engagement Center, we are working with those who are unhoused currently and those who are facing the threat of becoming unhoused and keeping them housed because it's easier to sustain them there versus trying to get them back into housing.
And the success of rent help really stabilized people during COVID, and during the pandemic, they got assistance and now they don't. So that's one of the causes of significant increases in homelessness, is that lack of financial assistance. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Jen. Oh, I'm sorry, Ben?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In our committee that was mentioned at the state level, early on in our interim, we asked as many stakeholders as we could think of to come to Bismarck and tell us what you're doing, what's working, what's not. And who's coordinating, who's quarterbacking the input side of where people are going? Is it somebody that needs a meal? Is it somebody needs a temporary shelter, or is there mental health or other needs? And we brought in the charitable people. We did hear from the city of Fargo. I believe it was from the police department that we heard of. Maybe public health as well. But can you share with us how that's going? Who's quarterbacking the input needs of those that are either homeless or at risk of becoming homeless in the area?
Sure. So I'm new and I have not been talking to the issue. It has been actually a wonderful partnership with Brenda Derrick, City Assistant Administrator, Jan Eliason, who is the director for the Harm Reduction Unit of Fargo Cass Public Health, and Chandler Essinger, who have been at this podium many times already. So I believe it's been a very nice team of folks that has been meeting. If you want one person to come forward to Bismarck to speak on this, I would probably suggest it would be Jan or Chandler, or I'm not sure. I think Brenda Derrick, if you want to phone a friend here.
Well, I think we've had a transition in public health with Jen just coming on, and we're trying to give her a little bit of time. But I think we will be transitioning sorry, Jen, that from me being more of the spokesperson to bringing Jen into that conversation more. And so between, and I'll be there for assistance, but I think it will be kind of that team effort between Jen, myself, and then we also have Chandler and Jan there to help.
Well, we're going to be wrapping up our interim committee work on the 19th of September. And I believe Senator Mathern and possibly a representative from Grand Forks are working on one suggestion of what the legislature should consider doing. I believe that the direction of that is predominantly around permanent housing and not so much around maybe triage of homelessness. And so it'd be good for those from the city of Fargo to reach out either to myself or to Senator Mathern, who's been kind of working on that bill, so we can decide what, if anything, we can bring forward out of the interim committee to try to make good on what the study was intending to do.
Representative Koppelman and Senator Mathern, this is one of my portfolios. I'd be really pleased to be a bridge from us to your folks, especially prior to that deadline. We'd be really honored to participate in that, and it'd be valuable proactively. So we know each other. I don't have your contact.
We will bring something forward to you, because the reality is that the jail's not finished yet. As we know, Cass County Jail's expanding but not ready. And Travis would tell you, Savanowitz, is that we oftentimes have clients, we don't know where to take them, we don't have any place to place them. And I think oftentimes the rural sites, mental health, what do? They take a deputy that transports them somewhere, that ties them up when they're not in the county to take care of people. We are trying to figure out, James Matthews came from Milwaukee and end homelessness and tried to give us some advice. The state has given us Mobile One. Mobile One has been fantastic because that takes my cops out of it, basically allows them to do, I think you saw on the slide, 1,000 encounters a month. Basically, my cops don't have to do that. I think we have some models that work, and we'll be happy to bring you some stuff. We're kind of culminating to get to that. Intent is to move our deck or engagement center out of downtown, but has to be close to downtown because that's where your clients are. And the idea is, can we work with the state to try something innovative that matches your mental health capacities and where do you place people? But the difficulty that the police force has, oftentimes, we don't have any place to place somebody that needs mental health crisis. And the chief will show that in a minute, how many hours it takes to manage certain people. So I think we'd be happy to have a great conversation on that. If you want, Senator Matter.
Just a clarification. We've been working on a bill to present to the committee on September 19th, Representative Vetter and I from Grand Forks, and it's a comprehensive proposal. I can share a draft with folks who are interested, but it literally looks at this issue from the perspective of homelessness to workforce and middle-class housing. So there's a big chunk in there. for that continuum, so the price tag is going to be over $200 million. Thank you.
Senator Judy Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You may all have noticed also in the news yesterday, just for a small help here, is that the VA is building a mental health center adjacent to the Veterans Home. And that's going to be a big deal because a lot of veterans have been encouraged to go to Ohio for PTSD counseling. And in visiting with them about maybe they could use some local sources or statewide sources for those who are unable to travel to Ohio for that specialized treatment. I think that's, everybody who is homeless or unsheltered is not a veteran. I don't mean that, but this is a bouquet here. This isn't one flower. We've got to figure out what all the various partners are going to be in order to assist everybody. But that's a major component, as we know. There are many veterans who are struggling with this, and I think that's going to take a while to get built, but it's going to be wonderful to have that in our community as well.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you. We'll try to keep moving here. Every day, tens of thousands of people move in and out Fargo. Our residents have spoken with clear voice that traffic enforcement and the need for public safety. They want to see more effort directed at dangerous driving behaviors. This fall, the Fargo Police Department will be launching a new traffic safety unit that we want to tell you about this morning. Chief Dave Zabowski is out of office today, but joining us virtually to provide remarks on the topic in regards to this on behalf of the Fargo Police Department. He also will discuss the need for mental health resources and support in Fargo. Mike, is he ready?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Chief. Can you hear us okay? And we have your slides
Yes,
up.
can you hear me?
Yep, we sure can, and we have you starting on your mental health slides.
Yeah, thank you. Mayor, if that's okay, I think just building upon Jen's presentation, I'll maybe start with the mental health, come back to the traffic. Does that work on your end?
That'd be fine.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Good morning, commissioners, legislators. Just to kind of build upon that really good presentation that Jen just provided you, and we do have a good, across the board, very good collaborative relationship between our departments. And I have spoken with Bloomberg, got some more investigation to do there, but she's correct in terms of location, in terms of the engagement center and having less of an impact on our downtown infrastructure. I think also I would agree with that would be an appropriate decision to give everyone the best results. And Representative Compliment, thank you. I did have an opportunity to present before your committee a few months back as well on the homeless and interrelated issues. And in terms of mental health, we've been tracking this. Our police department has been tracking this very carefully, probably since late 22, to the point where we've got some very good data too, to show the impact on our officers on a regular basis and our resources that the city is supporting. And again, homelessness, mental health, addiction issues are all inextricably connected in different ways. Not everyone that's homeless has a mental health issue or is addicted. So we're not in any way saying that, but there's an inner working there with these particular groups that our officers have contact with. And so just looking at the previous 30 days, and these are calls for service that are nothing more than a mental health crisis. They come into our department or into the dispatch center in a variety of ways. They might come in as someone having a mental health crisis, but they often come in through other means, disturbances, erratic behavior, suspicious people. Sometimes the individual's engaged in property damage or some other behavior that would otherwise be criminal, and officers go there, figure out what's going on, de-escalate the situation, and then take appropriate action, which is sometimes limited, because as the mayor and Jen has said, our resources in terms of mental health for chronic issues is lacking. We have a lot of things at the beginner, intermediate level, but we don't have an ability to address a group of folks that have some very significant chronic mental health issues and are just recycled in and out of the hospital, right back onto the street, getting into more interactions with other people and our officers. And so not good for them. They're not getting the treatment they need, not good for the public and or the businesses that are experiencing this, be it from crime itself or the perception of crime or fear, and not good for our officers' mental health, who are dealing with the same group of people day in and day out. And today, they might be able to reach them and de-escalate and get them somewhere for a small period of time. The next day, it could be an all-out, battle in essence, because they're just, we're not able to reach them. And so that's hard on everyone. So just looking at the last 30 days, so this would be July's report, 308 calls for service, July 8th through August 7th, that were nothing more than mental health calls for officers. 23% of those, 72 of those calls involve 10 individuals. And so we also track, what we would say are folks that have these significant issues, and we see them repeatedly month after month, year after year now. But our intelligence and analysis unit is able to pull all of this data and provide how many units were involved. Many of these calls, almost all of them, involve at least 2 officers, which is 2 squads, and sometimes more than that, depending on the level of mental health crisis going on. And the time is usually at least around an hour, but often way more than that. And so we know that 781 units responded to these calls. They're over approximation, 619 hours amongst the various officers involved. They're 25 days. Under approximation, 247 hours or 10 days, average call duration 52 minutes. Okay, that was just for that 30-day period. You could go to the next slide, Brian. Okay, so slide 6, right. So year to date. Now last year, just to provide context, last year in 2023, we were just under 3,000 mental health related calls for service. This is through August 7th, and we're at nearly 2,200. So the trend is continuing upward. I got some slides to show you that as well. Some of it is better tracking, but it also is an upward trend. And a lot of these folks are repeaters. So out of that 2,164, 380 or 18% of those individuals are listed at the right. Obviously, I redacted the names, but the numbers represent the number of mental health calls that individual has had through August 7th. Some of those people are more than one a week. And it's pretty persistent. The call time durations, if you look for the through August 7th data, 5,000 hours. 2,080 hours is a full-time position. So that's about 2.5 full-time positions. Under approximation, 1,792, just under 1 full-time position, average call 54 minutes. So it's having a significant effect on our police force, our personnel, our resource and operational capacity, as well as the folks that aren't really getting the mental health treatment that they need, some of whom are in the homeless population, some are not. And while we wholeheartedly support the Housing First initiative, we also recognize and know from Mr. Mathy that the Housing First initiative includes addressing mental health issues before placing someone in a home for those that need it. And so that's the tie-in to this significant issue, both on the police side and the public health side. Could you go to the next slide, please, Brian? So this is, if you look in the upper left quadrant, the top is our 2024 mental health calls, and you can see how they have, throughout the year, continued to be higher than last year. That last one only is about 1 week's worth of data. That's why that 83 is low. Obviously, when the month is full, we'll be back above here from the perspective. And with our trajectory, we're going to be well over 3,000 by the end of the year, the way we're going. I think one important point here in that lower right quadrant, just to kind of emphasize that it's not everyone that's homeless, but there's an interrelationship here. Beat 2 is our downtown beat. So 20% of these calls are happening there. Beat 5 on the southeast side of the city has actually more mental health calls for service. So while this is a citywide issue, we do know, because of the focus on downtown and homelessness, that it kind of intertwines with all of that. But I just wanted to give you some perspective that we see this across the board, and we really need some assistance with this issue. And it would also be a piece of the Housing First initiative and the homeless issue. I think we have one more. Is that the last slide? I think that's the last slide, Brian, right? Let's see. Yeah, and we know that the state, and I've had the opportunity to work with several of the legislators out there and other partners to talk about certified community behavior health clinics. And we know that DHS is putting together a plan to fund some of those. I believe the mayor is going to talk more about this in terms of city support and perspective on that. But that's the mental health data from the police department side. And I'll pause if there's any questions before I move into the traffic discussion.
Representative Scott Wagner.
Thank you, Mayor. Police Chief, back to the pie chart, just out of curiosity, it said 25%, if I have this right, in mental health incidents is in, what is it, quadrant or whatever, 5? What area of town is that? What area is
that
five?
is southeast.
Thank you.
Or no, it might be southwest. Yeah.
And so what drives that area, I guess, when we hear about downtown, what dynamic exists there, I guess, if...
Well, I think the key point is we've got people all over the city that have these mental health issues, right? And some of them are more significant than others. So this is the full quadrant. What drives it? I don't know in each specific incident, but overall, what we're seeing, at least with the chronic folks that we're talking about, is the inability to address their needs. They're in, they're out, and they're right back in a crisis or in some disturbance or contact with our officers.
I was just wondering if the hospital is located in that area, Sanford Hospital. So,
No, it is not. Sanford's located in, I believe that would be Beat 3.
Okay, thank you.
Middle section of town. Yeah, and it's not related to the calls. These are not calls to the hospital. These are calls on the street that our officers are taking, and then we end up taking them there in many instances, but or other places, but they're rarely, they're evaluated and they're out the door. There isn't anything more for them to do, even if they've got significant mental health issues.
Any other? Now we'll go to your traffic beat.
Okay, thank you. Another significant issue for Fargo, it's been a national issue as well, but certainly we're concerned with what's happening in our city, has been the dangerous driving that has been steadily increasing and persistent really since COVID 2020 timeframe. We have seen this repeatedly. We've gotten just enormous community outcry, feedback, requests for doing something in regards to these dangerous driving, these vehicles that are speeding and erratic driving, the loud muffler issues. We have a lot of people that have placed on these cars illegal mufflers and things that are loud, or they drive in that fashion. And so we looked at a lot of different things across the board, working with the city attorney's office as well, and identified a couple of things that we could use state legislative assistance on to help the city of Fargo regulate that behavior. While we recognize this is happening in other cities as well, but by and far may not be a large issue across other parts of the state, it is happening in cities and certainly in our city. And we're really just looking for some assistance at our local level to better address this. So what we found was that in the last legislative session, either 1 or 2 sessions ago, when there was the ability to double some fines, dangerous driving and exhibition driving, rather, racing, were left out of that mix. We'll talk about that more in just a second, but our fines in general are so low that there's no deterrent factor whatsoever. I mean, the amount that someone pays, and we're seeing this in our data in terms of stop signs, stoplights, the fleeing issue that I'm going to discuss in a moment. People don't do that as much when there's a higher fine or there's more penalty for that violation. When we need some legislative help, and we'll get to some specifics here in a second. One of the other things that we discussed, looking at other states and locations, is that in some locations, this behavior or these vehicles are deemed a nuisance to the community and seized until either the vehicle's corrected or whatever is deemed by the court. There's a due process to all of that. Wheat Ridge, Colorado was one example that we looked at. I followed up with their commander. They put it in place in 2023. So it had just been in place 1 year leading up to this June presentation. And he said they only had to seize one vehicle and that they had a significant change in the dangerous driving behavior just by having that in place. And so it's still new for them as well, but it is something to consider. And I believe we might need some assistance there with penalties to allow the city to consider that. The fleeing issue has been, it's completely just out of control, and it continues to grow. And this has gone on since 2020 as well, again, nationally and here in Fargo. If you look at the numbers, you'll see the increase each year, 2022, 2023, to currently through July 24. I'm sorry, yeah, slide 2. Thank you, Mike, or Brian. And so what you'll note is the cars that are fleeing, a large majority of them are not stolen cars. A lot of people would think, oh, they're fleeing because the car's stolen. Well, they're not stolen. Most of them, 78% in 22, 85%, 89% so far year to date in 24, not stolen. And again, more than half of those, we have license plates on our squad camera, so we know who owns the vehicle. 58 of those are dangerous driving or other traffic violations, the exact type of behavior that we're trying to correct. And so what's happening is there is a tendency for a lot of people just not to stop in general for traffic stops. It says 40, it's actually 1 out of every 39 stops, a vehicle flees our officers. In order not to further endanger the public, we don't pursue for those violations unless there's some type of a felony or weapon involved. Obviously, these folks know that, and so they, in a sense, make a mockery of the whole thing, and they continue to drive in this fashion. We did have a bill last session, SB 2348, that would have created an owner liability for fleeing vehicles. It passed through the Senate, did not make it all the way through the House. There were some questions and concerns. I have been working with Representative Schauer on this issue, and I know they've done some rewrites to really address issues that were brought up in the last legislative session. So I'm sure he'll be in touch, if he already has not, to just message to other legislators about this change in this new bill proposal. And we would certainly ask and hope that you would support that to help us, again, regulate this behavior, which is not only not good, but it's dangerous to the public as well when these vehicles take off. And we're not able to really do much about that without knowing who the driver is, et cetera, in terms of the fleeing. Next slide, please. And so in terms of options, working with our legal team, there's 3 options on there. One is just increasing the fine amount. I don't think that's going to be significant whatsoever. The ability to double the existing fine is an option. I don't think that's significant either. What we really came up with was the last one, which everyone agrees would be a recommended change, making those particular violations, drag racing, exhibition driving, infractions, which would again allow local control through our municipal court judge in terms of the fine amount, which can be up to $1,000, but it would allow our municipal judge to consider circumstances, to consider whether this individual is a repeat violator of these ordinance violations, and issue an appropriate penalty to change that behavior. We really just don't have any punch on that end at all, not just with these particular dangerous driving things, but some of our other traffic fines as well. Next slide, please. The other suggestion would be to look at the administrative penalties also from a point perspective. So our assistant city attorney pointed out that exhibition driving is 3 points, reckless driving is 8. But if you're traveling 26 miles over the speed limit, that's 9 to 10 points. Racing is 10 points. And so it seems like it's almost flip-flopped, or at least they should be similar, or maybe more points for this exhibition, reckless driving type of behavior. So there was just some suggestion there of maybe looking at that as another way of creating a deterrent factor and providing an enhanced penalty for those that don't want to follow the law. And I can tell you just anecdotally, we see it in the data trends. With any law, there's always your people in your community that are going to just follow the law 90% of the time. There's a small percentage that won't, and then there's people in the middle. And when the people in the middle don't see a significant penalty or deterrent factor to something that they might think looks interesting, like exhibition, drag racing, souping up your car and screaming all over the city, they start to do it. Because why shouldn't they? Nothing's being done about it. And so we really just, again, I'm happy to take any questions, but really ask for and hope to have some legislative support the city and the department on these particular issues. Thank you.
Representative Scott Wagner.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I guess I'm going to put on my old hat, my old county commissioner hat. And I think one of the issues with these type of issues, I mean, maybe there's some degree in Grand Forks and Bismarck, but being the second largest metro area in our state is half the size of ours. There's certain dynamics that maybe take place in this community, in this area, that aren't as big of issues in other areas. So sometimes it becomes not just bringing the issue forward, but who's communicating. And I'll say this as a former Cass County commissioner, you get it in Fargo, you'll get it, to a certain degree in Cass, being sensitive to the fact that, who's communicating. So I guess what level and degree, just maybe it's more of a comment, reaching out to the Peace Officers Association and other organizations in law enforcement that may be helpful, in moving something like this forward in that messaging. Because I'll tell you, there's just areas that just they don't see it, and then they may not, comprehend it to the level and degree that we have in this community. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Representative. Totally agree. And the North Dakota Chiefs of Police Association supported this last session. They will again in this next session. And again, I think if there's concerns in other areas of the state, this is something that, from even a local control perspective, could be legislated to a certain population base or cities of certain size as well, just to also, I think, eliminate any concerns about other parts of the state where maybe this isn't an issue, or maybe legislators in that area don't feel this is something they want on the books. So, again, I think there's multiple options here that would help everyone out, but we really just need some of this additional tools to help curb this behavior in Fargo. Thank you.
Commissioner Turnberg.
My question to the legislators is, why is this not passing? And why is there not support for stronger fines for speeding and reckless driving, over the speed limit, racing? I mean, I'm scared to death to speed in Minnesota, not so much in North Dakota.
Representative Ben Koppelman.
Well, thank you. Well, I think the reason why some of us at this table wouldn't speed in Minnesota might be the traffic fines, but that does not seem to be, that's like speeding on the interstate, like 10 miles over the interstate or something. But I think what the chief is referring to and what we dealt with in our transportation committee was the excessive dangerous municipal speeding, where, I mean, let's face it, the interstate, if you're a reasonably good driver and you don't have heavy traffic, you're probably not going to be in like critical danger at 85 miles an hour. But if you drive 60 and a 30 in town, that's a whole different ballgame. And so what we tried to balance in the committee, we did pass a comprehensive speeding fine bill. Representative Wagner and DeConne are both on the same committee, and it failed through the conference committee process in the Senate. So that was something that maybe we can revisit, but that was getting all the speed limit fines on one schedule. It was improving it. As to why the exhibition driving, reckless driving, and others are not in the double category, was because when that went through, that was kind of a compromise the legislature had predominantly with the city of Fargo after a lawsuit over fines years ago. And they already went in and had already doubled those prior to allowing the doubling. So they're like, they weren't going for quadrupling. But that could be revisited. The fleeing bill, I guess personally, I had an issue with the way that was done, because it basically said, you as the vehicle owner are guilty unless you want to rat out who did the crime and unless you can account for where we can find that person and assist us to get that person. And we're like, well, hold on a second. I mean, if the person was using my car, I'll tell you who used it. If I don't know who's using the car, I'll tell you I don't know. But that didn't get you off the hook. Unless you could turn evidence against them, you were guilty of something. And so that's where it fell flat in the House, in the committee. And if we're going to pursue that, we're going to have to take a different approach. I can tell you when I was that age of, crazy and loud mufflers and all that sort of thing, the thing that deterred me was that the police actually would have pursued me. And so some of the policy changes by law enforcement are to blame for this. And there's probably good reason to change them, like, the safety of others isn't worth the pursuit. But back in the day where they'd pursue you, that was the deterrent.
we'll continue, and that is a discussion ongoing. I know we'll work with your committee and try to see what we can do this year as far as getting that done. I just want to get to one other area. Our final topic we want to discuss is the local communities, the transit system, and this is a problem throughout the state, I think, just because we're more rural than the big metro areas. The cost to operate safe, modern vehicles to serve the community to be direct is staggering. Transit is a critical service that connects the elderly, new Americans, and other Fargo residents to jobs and economic opportunity. In this regard, we see transit as economic and a community development necessity. It connects our citizens to employment and serves workforce needs of the employers. For example, our neighbors in Minnesota have a different view of transit than North Dakota. In addition to providing capital funding, they also provide operating funding, which really makes a critical difference. You can see that investment across the state when we look across the border, how much money is supplemented to their transit system. We have to be able to keep our people connected to their jobs, and we need to have enough rides and routes to get people to work. So Julie will present to you what's been going on in transit lately, but when I looked at my budget and people talked about the budget this year went up 11%, 3.5 million of that is transit, is a deficit in transit. And I don't really like that, but when we went through 200,000, all of a sudden we said, oh great, we're 200,000, now we'll be one big metro system. The feds will really pay us well for that, won't they? No, the feds decreased their funding. They didn't increase their funding, they decreased their funding. So it puts more burden on the city of Fargo to maintain the transit system, and it's a challenge for Julie. So she usually can get funding or grants for capital funding, but not for operating. And it's the operating that kills us, basically, to be frank. And Julie, you'll have one slide. I know you'll show us how much more we as a city have had to put in over the last 5 years. So I know that'll come. So Julie Baldwin will give her presentation, Director of Transit.
Good morning. Thank you for attending and addressing our issues. Transportation is an issue that, and we were just talking with the chief and how all these things are going on out there. Well, we're in the mix. We're out there. We have a lot of service on the streets, and we're talking about, you see the large buses running around, that's our fixed route service, and then you see the smaller buses, which are rides that are booked individually, and that's transportation for people with disabilities that cannot utilize the fixed route system. So focusing on funding, Federal Transit Administration, that's our overarching entity that we work with at the federal level. And what has happened is the cities in this metro area, so Fargo, Moorhead, Dilworth, West Fargo, they have gone over the 200,000 population. So the impact to our funding, like Mayor Mahoney was saying, has not been a positive increase. We have seen a decrease of about 17% in our federal funding, and that's in our operating money. We also have access to capital money. That has also been reduced. So we're seeing a significant change in the amount of funding that the city itself has to put in to operate the system. And we want to, my apologies, I don't see that slide with the local share amounts in there. But like the mayor was saying, it's about 3.5 million this year. And over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, we have seen access to the post and during COVID money, so the ARPA and the COVID dollars that have come through. Those were utilized and very much appreciated, but they are fully expended. So when we're talking at the state level, we get state aid through North Dakota DOT. I did list the monies here that we have received as far as just Fargo strictly goes. And the way that the funding works with the state aid, the state of North Dakota, there's 53 counties in the state, and each county gets the exact same amount. This year it was about $36,000. If there's more than one provider in a county, that gets split equally between the providers. In the Fargo, West Fargo area, there's 3 providers. There's us, there is Handy Wheels, and there is Valley Senior Services. So we each got $12,000. And then up to this figure that for 2025, $590,000. The additional money is from our ridership on our elderly and disabled routes that we operate within this metro area. So what we'd like to, I'm going to jump to this next slide here, and then I'll go back to a little more federal stuff. But what we're honing in on is Fargo is by far the largest provider. We're the only one in the state that has exceeded the 200,000 population. So we moved to their large urban category. We give, or gave, for 2024, and this is the state fiscal year, so we're talking July through June 30 of the following year. So in the general public area, fixed route like I'm talking, we gave 706,000 and change rides. In the statewide amount numbers, it was about 1.4 million. So Fargo, even though we received the same amount as every county out there, we gave throughout the entire state a little over 50% of the rides for general public. And when it comes to elderly and disabled rides, we provided about 34% of those rides. So what we're trying to focus in on is there has never really been a plan in place. If there's an area that goes over the 200,000 like we have done, we would like to revisit some of the way that the Century Code is set up and is working and how the funds are allocated. We do not want to impact anybody else's funding. We just would like to revisit the way some of that's done for the urbans especially. The federal funding, just to show you a quick overview of how it flows down, we have FTA, they flow it down to the DOT, the funding. Fargo's sitting out on its own with the 200,000 population in North Dakota. There are other agencies, like I was saying, that are under the 200,000. If you're between 50 and 200,000, you're considered a small urban, and you do gain access to additional funding like we had in the past. That money is no longer available to us. And then we have our rural areas, which are under 50,000. That's most of North Dakota. So the urban funding distribution, we have 3 different pots of money, like I was saying, and the different funding levels that have dwindled over the course of time that we have changed to the 200,000. Just a quick side note on what Mayor Mahoney was saying about Minnesota. They actually fund about 85% of the operating that goes into the Minnesota agencies. So that vastly different philosophies. I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent. They are just vastly different.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yes, please.
Can you just help me understand, does the state funding come through the Department of Health and Human Services budget, or does it come through the DOT budget?
Comes through DOT.
Does
And
anybody here do anything with the DOT budget? I'm looking at, nope, neither of you. Okay.
In this year, it was about 4.6 million total. Yeah.
Mayor Mahoney?
Kathy,
Do all the transportation providers in the state have an organization like the police chiefs and all the other groups? And have you discussed this with the other providers in the state? Because it doesn't make sense. It seems totally illogical that we're providing 50% of the rides and getting not appropriate funding. Is there a group at the state level working on this transportation formula at all?
There is, we have a Dakota Transit Association that most of the agencies belong to, and they are our advocacy group that we, and Jordan, who's one of my assistant directors, is on that body. He's fairly new to it, last couple of years, but in the past, when we've done efforts and brought it forward, many legislative sessions we've taken this through, we have had different lobbyists that have assisted us, and we've tried to get the actual formula changed, worked with the rurals, worked with the urbans. It's a tough thing when you're going there and asking for more money. But right now, we are assembling a group, but we don't have everybody identified yet to take this forward.
May I continue? The other two questions is, have you raised this issue with both the North Dakota League of Cities and the North Dakota Association of Counties on their resolutions so that they put it on their legislative agenda officially? Because I think those kinds of things make a real difference, and there's enough people in this room who could make that happen. I think that, you obviously don't have a very strong, unified
We don't.
voice. And we need a better system.
Well, I can understand why other cities would be like, no, please, if you're not going to put more in the pot, you're taking from me. So I can understand
Right.
why we would be alone on an island there. But I think, and I'm not sure there should be a volume-based variable as well.
Mm-hmm. Which is traditional formulas that those two entities would know. Yeah.
Yep.
We will work with you on this. It's a great
Absolutely.
idea, I think. Senator Judy Lee.
And we're not the only place that has this issue, because for the last year almost, I've been working with an individual in Bismarck, whom those of us in the Capitol know, who has been trying to get to work at a job she has at the Capitol. And the city bus system, she lives a mile from the Capitol, and it takes an hour to get there. And the city ordinances said that every cab company that was licensed in the city of Bismarck had to have a certain percentage of disabled accessible cabs. But there is no regulation or statute in this city, that ordinance that says that cab companies have to be licensed. So none of them are licensed anymore. And so she'd had a terrible time. Now, the city of Bismarck has a different administration than they had a year and a half ago. So they now have done something with disabled accessible transportation, I am pleased to say. But the point is, well taken, that Senator Hogan mentioned that the League of Cities and the Association of Counties needs to be dealing with this. We have some rural senior busing, as we all know. I thought that was with aging services, but maybe it is DOT. And so there are people to link arms with here, both in the rural and urban areas, who I think would be equally interested in seeing a more equitable solution to this.
Thank you. Senator Scott Wagner.
Yep, thank you. I think one thing to look at maybe as a template, and it's for infrastructure, but the highway distribution fund, kind of looking at that, how that's allocated, because that's allocated through, all the political subdivisions and stuff, as a potential template in terms of that distribution formula for something like this. Just a thought.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. This is our slide that shows us the commitment that the city of Fargo has invested in the transit system over the years, and you can, from 21 through 24, you can see that it has gone up significantly over the course of time. And part of that is impacted by the federal funding. There's no question about that. But the state aid is something that I appreciate all the conversation that we can improve on. One thing that I myself hear a lot about is why bother? Why have public transportation out there? Well, I think that there's the need to recognize there are many, many folks out there. Pre-COVID, we were given close to 2 million rides a year. That dropped off during COVID. We had to cut back on routes. There just was not funding, and a lot of folks didn't want to drive. So we had a very challenging time getting drivers on board. So we did take a big hit as far as the service we could provide. But people out there, we've got locally and nationally, we've got a lot of college students that ride, just your regular basic adults, elderly disabled folks, new Americans. Where's everybody going? They're getting to work, they're getting to education, recreation. They can ride it for whatever purpose that they want to ride it. We also have a lot of influx from the rural areas where the public transportation system that exists there brings them into the larger metro areas so that they can access the healthcare services. And as we all age, and some days I feel it more than others, but we are seeing what they call the silver tsunami. We have a lot of baby boomers aging out and needing to tap into these resources. When we look at workforce development, that's a vital thing that we're looking at here, and a significant destination is to jobs. Nationally, about 50% of all transit trips are to work. Like you were saying, the lady going to the Capitol, going to work. I mean, that's a productive individual that we want to help get to where they need to be. One thing that many of the transit riders do face is income levels. They tend to have a lower income level, under 50,000 a year. That's over half those folks that have that. And when you're talking that you can gain access to transportation, that level of freedom is irreplaceable. It's a very valuable service for those folks. But we need to look at what is the best system out there. I recognize we can improve every corner of the road, but we want folks getting where they need to go to school, employment, everything else. Where are we headed? All the discussion, again, very good discussion. We need to coordinate with NDDOT, MnDOT as well. They're part of our system on the Minnesota side. Those are not the numbers you're seeing, though. That's all Fargo, West Fargo. And MetroCog, our local MPO, to work on some of these issues. And like we were saying, work with the rural properties as well as the urbans and help facilitate some future NDDOT state aid impacts. So I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have.
So I'll ask Julie if you're available after the presentation, that anybody could ask you a question.
Absolutely.
So the team here is aware we're under duress on this, and we'll try to work together on this. I think just as legislators, you have to know with the city of Fargo, we're trying to be very cognizant of what's going on in the world. We did not increase our mills. If I increase our mills, it's only about 800,000. So to take up a 3.5 deficit, you would be going way up on your bills. And I think with the property tax out there, we did not want to do anything to do that. So we've been very cognitive to try to keep that down. We also did not hire any new employees this year. We basically did a job freeze, and you will see some reductions actually. We're going to have some reductions in some of our departments. So I think as a city, we've tried very hard to be cognitive of the challenges you face, and I think we're trying to help out the best we can in regards to that. We're going to try to meet again in October or November with you as a team, just to what other things and maybe work together now. We'll talk to you a little bit about what we could do in the homeless situation and or requests. I'll work on that. We'll work on transit a little bit to give you some information on that. It's a challenging, it's interesting to me because in our state, we're the biggest metro area you have. And we know our challenge is being a metro area. We have challenges that happen with that. And I think our difficulty as you represent us or out there is there's a lot of rural sites that just don't have the same challenges. And I think because of that, we have to try to figure that out. Ben, to your comment on traffic is probably the biggest complaint the commissioners get is traffic. They don't like mufflers, they don't like racing cars, they don't like reckless driving. The chief has got a traffic unit that's coming up this fall. We're going to do that. We're happy. We do work with the county sometimes and with the highway patrol and have weekends in which we go out and do a lot of stuff. We, from the public perspective, get that. The second biggest item basically in our community right now is downtown and how to manage downtown. Quote, is it safe? And it is safe, but the difficulties we have is how many police officers do I need? Chief says we haven't added any. We actually added 6 grant officers last year, police force. And in his mind, the grant doesn't count, but it really does because it's boots on the ground. You basically are putting people out on the street. So, and once the grant's over, we have to absorb that. That's just the way the federal government does, right? Gives you a gift, but then you have to take that gift that keeps giving, you have to manage afterwards. We have gone from 35 people down in the police department to we're fully staffed right now. We have gone from academy that used to attract 10 to 20 people, it attracts 40 people for 10 jobs. So we've done a great job in recruiting and we've figured that out. Our fire department is expanding. We've got a new fire station going in and they've been recruiting people, but there are also challenges, salaries, how you compete in the community. We're trying to fix that. We're going to do a COLA adjustment. 4.5 is hopefully what we can get for our employees to be competitive in the market. And as you all know, living here, the difficulty in Fargo-Moorhead, wages are going up. And I hate it when I train somebody, then they go over to private sector. You train excellent people, and the next thing you know, they're in the private sector because they can make 10 or 20% more. So that's a challenge as a municipality. How do you keep competitive and how do you keep your people? And I think you all understand that. But we're glad that you represented us to take care of us, work with us. We're happy to provide you anything you need. You'll see a lot of our department heads are in the audience. If there's any particular area you want to challenge or go into, I'd be happy to have those discussions. And Jen's got some new challenges that we have to do, but I think if we do an engagement center, move it, it's going to cost money, but do we think of a different innovative way as a state to help manage that? And I think, as we all know on this table, mental health has been a challenge throughout the state, just how the dynamics of the state of North Dakota has managed that. So I'll leave it for any questions you would have now, Senator Hogan.
It's kind of the elephant in the room. If the property measure passes, do you have contingency plans in place?
No, we don't. We're hoping you give us the solutions, because that would be very devastating to us. That's 45 million right now. And property tax for us is only 30% of our budget. So it's all the other things that you have to do.
Exactly.
And if I increase fees, people will squawk. I mean, if we increase any fees, we get squawk, so.
And it's 45 million. Thank you. That's helpful to know.
Mayor.
Senator Scott Wagner.
You gave the law enforcement numbers. I'm just curious if anybody has the number for every open fighter position. How many applicants do you usually receive on average?
How many applicants for which?
Per firefighting position, open fire.
They don't get as many as they used to. So what's gone on in the police department, they have an active recruiting team that goes out and texts and notices, and tries to get people.
Do you have a number, or is there someone that could provide that? Just
Maybe one of the guys back on fire, do you have numbers of people you get for application? Is that the question, Scott?
Is this on? Yeah. This last application period, we got roughly around 80 applicants. That's been up from the previous few years, but we also dropped our hiring requirements. So we're getting a younger workforce, a less qualified workforce. But then out of that, the fire department only hires once a year. And we build a hiring list from that. So we roughly got 80 applicants to fill the 15 positions we have now, and we still have 4 openings.
And the difficulty the fire department has for us is that oftentimes they come out of high school or 18, 19 and get in the department, and then 4 or 5 years out, they're not as enamored with it and they quit. So the retention issue is our biggest issue in the fire department right now. We also have a little bit in the police department. Senator Matter.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, for having us. I would just encourage us to have a discussion in the future about the relationship between the city and the state, and that relationship maybe should change as the city grows. We have sometimes taken over authority of cities that maybe should be returned to the cities. There are items on the agenda today, for example, that I believe the city could literally handle if the state did not tie your hands. So I would just encourage you to bring it up as a macro item at a future discussion. Thank you.
I see our challenge as the largest metro in the state, that we actually really have to be partners with the legislative team, because there's some things you may have not funded in the past that maybe you do now help funding just because of size, just because we cannot make it off all our residents to take care of all the people. When you have a 20% growth in 10 years, that's a lot of new people to absorb in your system, and that's what we're seeing. And the secondary thing that's happening, and I think you all know this, is our neighbors are benefiting from all the economic growth in Fargo. So West Fargo, Horace, Castleton, Mapleton, all these different places are really benefiting from that. And it's kind of, they're a mix of rural, urban, right? I mean, it's just kind of an amazing thing. But if you look at the per capita income in Horace, it's even higher than West Fargo. So you have people with a lot of income that are living in more rural sites. Well, that doesn't necessarily help the city of Fargo, because let's say our average income is $65,000. I think West Fargo, Ben, isn't it about 70, 80,000, and Horace is 90 to 95,000. The numbers may not be correct, but it's real close to that, 10 to 20 grand more each time you make that move. So I'd love to have all those big houses in my neighborhood, but that helps you to take care of your people. So we appreciate your time today. I'm very much glad that we had a good turnout. I know you're all very busy, and again, I want to thank you. I don't know that I'd love to live in Bismarck for 4 months, so I think we really appreciate the fact that you guys will take the time in your busy jobs.
Can I ask one really quick? I think last time we were here, the last presentation said MetroCog, and it reminded me of one of the conversation pieces that we had at that was the issue with insurance with MetroCog. Was that addressed or was that resolved?
The
Do you remember they were-
MetroCog issue with insurance, there
You know
was
what
an
we're talking-
insurance
I'm
and
talking
liability
about?
or something that we had at one time?
Where MetroCog couldn't get
Insurance.
insured, so then they couldn't get the federal funding. It was like this weird, like, catch-22. I'm assuming it was addressed since we haven't heard about it, but I'm
I
curious.
don't have confirmation that it was addressed, but I will check. I'm assuming, like you just said, we have not, locally, we have not heard again about that, so.
Because they weren't technically a political sub. It was a weird
Correct.
thing. Okay.
Correct. So I will double check on that for you.
Thank you for bringing that up. That was an issue I remember last time, so. Again, thank you very much appreciate you being here. And Jim Rose, I'm sorry you won't be a legislative guy anymore, so you won't be able to help us out anymore. You're end of career now, so I think that it was very nice for the work you did.